All right, we will go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, In-Depth Advocacy, Condition of the State. So we are going to go over a few things, kind of what the governor covered in her speech last week, what we expect to see this session, and then what you can start advocating on. So first, we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Michelle Johnson. I'm the Government Relations Director at IASB.
I'm Dave Doughton, School Administrators of Iowa, Government Relations Director.
Kate Walton. I work with Edie Walton, and we represent the area education agencies.
So today we're kind of going to go over the makeup of the Iowa legislature. Since it was an election year, we kind of have some new faces, changes in committees, that kind of thing. And then, like I said, we'll go over what Governor Reynolds has recommended and what her priorities are, what our priorities as organizations are, kind of some issues outside of education policy that might take up some time at the Capitol, and then, of course, what you can do for advocacy. So we will start with Kate to go over the Iowa legislature.
Very good. As many of you know, in this last election cycle, House Republicans and Senate Republicans each extended their majorities. I apologize if it's a little noisy. I couldn't find a quiet place at the Capitol. So in the Iowa House, Iowa House Republicans added 3 members to the majority. They have a 67-seat supermajority for the first time since the 70s. There were 3 incumbent Democrats that were defeated. Sue Cahill, who's an educator from the Marshalltown area, Representative Molly Buck from the Ankeny area, and then Representative Chuck Eisenhart from the Dubuque area. There were 2 open seats that flipped, which is how we ended up at Republicans plus 3. Representative Sharon Steckman from the Waterloo area retired, and a Republican won in that seat. And then Representative Luana Stoltenberg, who's a Republican, retired, and a Democrat won in that seat. So that's how we end up with Republicans plus 3 after the last election cycle in the Iowa House. We can go. And then in the Iowa Senate, the Republicans extended their majority by 1 seat. They now have 35, which is also a supermajority. Senate Democrat Nate Bolton in the Des Moines area was defeated, as was Senator Eric Giddens from the Cedar Falls area. The only Republican incumbent who was not reelected was Senator Brad Zahn from Urbandale. We do have 1 open seat special election. As many of you know, former state senator Chris Knoyer was selected to be Governor Reynolds' lieutenant governor. So there will be a special election to fill her Senate seat. We expect that the Republicans are likely to retain that seat. I believe that President Trump won that seat by 18 or 19 points. So it is likely a Republican will maintain that seat, and that the majorities will stay at 35-15. So there is a supermajority for Republicans in both chambers. And in each of the last 3 election cycles, Republicans have extended their majority. So we do have new House education chairs. The only returning chair is Representative Skylar Wheeler, who will chair the House Republican Education Policy Committee. Representative Austin Harris is new in the Education Appropriations Committee. Senator Lynn Evans, who's a retired superintendent, will chair the Policy Committee in the Senate. And then Senator Jesse Green will chair the Appropriations Committee in the Senate.
Hey, Michelle, just to jump in for a second, we've got like 120 people participating in this. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A, and we'll try to follow along with those as we move through. So, okay.
Yes,
sorry,
thank
Michelle.
you for that, Dave. Yes, good reminder. Please ask questions if you guys have them. So last week on Tuesday, the governor did give her condition of the state speech, which is where she lays out her legislative priorities for the session. As you know, she's been pretty powerful getting those priorities past the past few sessions. So what she says carries a lot of weight. So we'll start with her supplemental state aid, her SSA proposal. She did propose 2% Not a huge surprise there. So the per pupil increase, that would equal $157 per pupil. Total new money is 102 million, which is a lot of times what they like to go off of. They like to kind of keep the total new money the same every year. So right around that $100 million is pretty typical. Of course, with this level of SSA, that will lead to 159 districts being on the budget guarantee, which statewide equals about 25 million.
And I just want to add in on this one too, that, one of the things we're trying to do here is talk to you about what's coming up, but also a little bit about advocacy and some things with the 2% proposal for SSA. One, it's below what the current inflation rate or CPI, which is 2.9 or somewhere in that area, which makes it an issue. The budget guarantee, as the SSA number goes lower, the budget guarantee, there's more districts on the budget guarantee, which raises property taxes. So that's something that as you're having conversations with legislators, you can talk to them about. The higher they can make SSA, the less property taxes will be collected to help districts get to that point.
So we were happy to see that the governor proposed somewhat of something around preschool. She's calling it her early childhood continuum of care. So it's not exactly what we've been talking about for the past couple years, but what it is incentive grants for preschool providers and childcare providers who work together to provide that full day of school and then childcare. So we know that the wraparound services is one of the barriers to students attending a full day preschool program. So we're happy to see that she is thinking about that and trying to address that barrier. However, the funding is somewhat unclear. She said she's going to take 16 million from Early Childhood Iowa and federal funds. Kind of unclear what that means for Early Childhood Iowa. And then shift $3.6 million from the Shared Visions preschool program. So it's there's no bill yet, so it's somewhat unclear about how all of this will work. The devil is in the details. So we want to see an actual bill before we kind of get too worked up about it. We are excited to see that the governor has proposed something around preschool. However, we were hoping it'd be a little closer to what we were proposing, which puts it into the school aid formula.
Michelle brings up a really good point. Everything that the governor put out on last week was a proposal. There is no legislation yet. And even the legislation that we'll talk a little bit about that it has been put up already is still just legislation. It's not a law, and it will more than likely go through changes if it doesn't die completely. So keep in mind the things we're talking about now are things that could happen. It'll probably change between now and this afternoon, actually. So, but it changes very regularly. Some of the additional recommendations that the governor made, and here they are in their proposals. We've been hearing all along that the governor wanted to do something with the cell phone policy. We believe that what the governor is presenting is going to be a floor on the policy, and districts who choose to go further than that can do that. Many districts are already doing it, but we know there will be legislation coming out probably fairly soon on that. The governor also made a proposal about a focus on math that will require more teacher training and math supports that could require some individualized programming for math. As I listened to the proposal and read the things that the governor put out, it seems to me that it may end up being like what you're already doing with early literacy. And literacy in your upper grades. So we'll see what happens with that. A third point that was a recommendation was civics test requiring high school graduates to pass the U.S. citizenship test. We're hopeful that if that does go through, there will be some waivers for different things that could cause students to have issues with passing that test. One thing that was really good was the governor proposed to continue the $14 million for support personnel. You remember last year when we had the teacher salary increase, there was also legislation which gave districts money out of a total of $14 million for support staff. The governor has included that in her budget again. So that's a good thing. That's something that's going to have to be re-upped every year in appropriations. Also last year when the teachers' pay was raised for starting teachers and some of the veteran teachers, it created a little bit of a conflict on some of the things. And what the governor has proposed is that rather than veteran teachers who are on IPERS coming back to teach again, having to be paid $62,000, it would allow them to be paid $50,000. So that's some stuff that they're going to have to figure out and get in some legislation if it's going to move forward.
And the only thing I'll add on the cell phone policy is IASB does have a sample policy on it. And we're hoping that whatever the governor does come out with and whatever passes, if you've implemented one of those policies, you'll be good to go. As Dave said, it should be just a floor. So anything additional you're doing should also be A-okay. So next we'll talk about our priorities as organizations, IASB SAI, and then the AEAs. I'm sure you guys can probably guess what the first one is. It's preschool. I've been talking to you guys about it for 2 or 3 years now. I think you guys probably know our proposal, but again, we would like it to be a 1.0 weighting for students at or below 185% of poverty. So this puts it into the school aid formula. That's how this would work, which is different than what the governor is proposing, which is using other funds that are already out there. This would be more sustainable because once we do that implementation over the first 2 years of getting up to that 1.0, it would just be part of the school aid formula. So it's a lot more stable than kind of relying on different funding from elsewhere to be appropriated each year. So I don't think I need to go into all the details of why we think preschool is a great idea. You guys probably know why it works well in your district and the advantages of getting students into a quality full-day preschool program. Top among those is early literacy, which the governor has also pushed as a priority. So we think that ties in nicely to what she's trying to accomplish. So again, we're still pushing for our proposal, but we are happy that the governor has at least taken an interest in preschool itself.
Yeah, and I'll talk about the staff shortage issue. We know that when we go around and talk to superintendents at AEA meetings, we hear from them that the biggest issue they have is having enough funds, but also the fact that they need more staff. We have done surveys in each of the last 2 years, a little bit different format, but we have data that shows that many districts are short of staff, whether it be as teachers, whether it be as paraprofessionals or others, bus drivers and all others. Many districts are dealing with that. We know that's not, it happens all over the state and all over the country, but we are working to find ways that will help with that. The raising of salaries, the teacher salaries helped. I think it would keep some people in the profession. I think it will help get more people to come into the profession to begin with. But there are still a vast number of openings. And so there's some negative impacts of that. And you guys all know that. Your teachers are having to cover for teachers who aren't there. Some administrators are covering for teachers that aren't there. Some others are driving buses plus doing a full-time job in the district. There's just a lot of things that are happening. We're using long-term subs in many different positions. And while we very much appreciate having them in, they don't necessarily have the content knowledge that, let's say, a math graduate would have. So as we mentioned, it increases the workload, and many districts are at a point where they're not able to offer some of the courses that they want to offer because they don't have the staff to do it. I would encourage you to continue to talk to your legislators about that. My summary from last week, I talked about that in the SAI report. You need to talk to your legislators and help them to understand. One of the things we tend to do as a school staff, as school districts, is figure out ways to get it done. And we have been doing that, but I'm not sure we've been sharing enough what it takes to get those things done. And so we need to share that administrators are out of the office teaching a class, that teachers are covering for other teachers when they're gone because we don't have subs. You need to share that with your legislators every chance that you get. And we're going to continue to work on things to help with this. We're looking at recruitment and retention funding to provide some extra funding to help keep and draw teachers into districts. And we're looking at some licensure flexibility. We don't want to lower standards, but we also need to know that we have to have teachers in a classroom. So we're going to work on those and some other things that hopefully will help us address the staff shortage.
And then the third one that we really want to highlight is obviously adequate supplemental state aid. Adequate can have a lot of meanings, so I think this is where your advocacy really comes in key here. What does adequate mean for your district? It doesn't just mean a baseline of funding. It means that you have enough money to cover the cost, the basic costs of running a district that have gone up because of inflation. And then the increased cost of providing special education services, which have increased for a myriad of reasons, which I'm sure you can all guess why. And then you also want to provide innovative and exciting programs to your students. You don't just want to provide the basics, you want to make school exciting for your students. And I think when we're asking for money, which everyone does, you have to say what that money means to your school district and what it means to students. It's not just a number, it's not just 2% or 2.5%. It means something in your district. And so I think sharing what a low SSA means, hey, that might mean one less teacher for CTE class, or, oh, we can't offer that math class this year. Like things like that, that make it more real to them instead of just kind of going with your handout, because every group up at the Capitol is usually asking for money for something. So tell them what that money is going towards and that it's an investment in the future is really what we always try to stress to legislators instead of just saying, we need money. What is that for? So then there are a couple issues outside of education that will probably be taking up some time and space in the legislature's mind this year. So again, we have Kate, our expert here. She does a lot on Medicaid, so she will be happy to talk to you about this one.
Yes, so the first we'll talk about is the projected revenue decline. The Revenue Estimating Conference is estimating a $1 billion reduction in revenue over the next 2 years. This is a two-factor issue. The first is the state income tax cuts that have been passed, advocated for by the governor and passed by the legislature, have been accelerated, and so the state is collecting less revenue. Additionally, the federal relief dollars that were readily available during the COVID pandemic are phasing out. And so while there are rules around not supplanting federal funds for state funds, those incoming funds had eased some pressure on state funds in other areas. So we're looking at a $1 billion reduction again over the next 2 years. The state is currently sitting on a fairly significant reserve fund. They have been spending significantly less than what has been collected. And the governor is proposing using some of those reserves to bridge through this time. And the public statements of the legislature right now indicate that they are willing to take a look at that. They are not ruling that out. And I have joked, probably many of you have heard, there's never been a time in the now 24 years I've worked in this building where I've heard legislators say, oh, there's plenty of money to fund our priorities. There's nothing to worry about. But you're going to hear even more that we don't have money. We don't have the funds to do that. And this is why that you'll hear that. We also have a projected Medicaid shortfall of $218 million in the upcoming fiscal year. This is again primarily a result of the unwinding of the public health emergency that took place during the COVID pandemic. The state Medicaid program is funded with a state and federal match, and the federal government had enhanced the match rate during the COVID pandemic, and that is no longer the case moving forward. So you will see Medicaid is a difficult program to cut because it is an entitlement program. So you will see some adjustments probably around the edges of that program, and then a look for ways to fill that gap this year. You're also going to hear a lot about property taxes, and we obviously know that touches the education space. The governor has proposed the Iowa version of DOGE, which is taking place at the federal level. And her public statements would indicate that she is envisioning that will look for ways for county and local governments to be more efficient and to facilitate the property tax discussion. Obviously, we are still waiting on details on that, but those are some high level things that will affect the discussion around school funding and property taxes in the coming year. When you ask, I see a question in the chat about how much is currently in the state reserve fund. There are a variety of ways to calculate that. It is anywhere between $2 and $6 billion, depending upon which funds you are including in that. There is the state rainy day fund, there's the taxpayer relief fund. So some of that is how that is combined. But there are ample funds in the reserves to bridge through some of this, but there will be a reluctance around funding ongoing expenditures with reserve funds.
So
Yeah.
there's some other issues on the horizon that Dave and I kind of wanted to touch on that you might have already heard about, or that there's kind of already been legislation introduced on. So Dave, do you want to do the student information system?
Yeah, there is no legislation on this right now, but it's been rumored for several months now about the state wanting to go to a statewide student information system. There was a bill last year that proposed this that was killed for a variety of reasons. But we just want you to be aware that it could be happening. Whether that's going to happen in legislation or whether it's going to happen as just a Department of Ed decision will remain to be seen. There are pros and cons for that. Many districts like the student information system they have, and if everybody's on the same one, then many people are going to be unhappy because everybody will have to switch over to that one. So we'll see where that goes. Chronic absenteeism is one also that you're all aware of, and that we have heard from legislators that they want to do some things with that. We're not quite sure what they're going to try to do with it, but we know it needs to be fixed, from things like the involvement of county attorneys to the certified letters and getting them back, etc. School start date is one that when we've been going out and talking with superintendents, we've been saying, well, we really don't think they're going to do anything, because last year there were 4 bills and they didn't do anything with them. Already this year, there are 3 bills having to do with school start date. We still don't know if anything is going to happen. So we'll kind of take a look at that and see what's going on, but we will work toward those legislators that are proposing that to see if we can't get some traction with the school start date. And we all know that the date is on a Saturday this year, and that's not optimal because of different reasons, but hopefully we'll see something go with that. Michelle, you want to talk about the curriculum stuff?
Yeah, so you guys probably remember last year there was a lot of stuff of trying to put very specific stuff about curriculum into code. So we're generally opposed to that. It makes it way too specific, and we don't like to legislate curriculum specifically in code. A couple of those have already come back this year, specifically around the human growth and development, fetal development. You might remember the Baby Olivia video bill from last year. It's back. I expect there'll probably be more about civics education or history, that kind of stuff again this year. So what we always say is that the legislature sets broad requirements. You have to take 4 years of English, that kind of thing. Then the State Board of Education will set those content standards, which are reviewed regularly. And then local districts adopt curriculum to match and meet those content standards. So putting very specific stuff in code is kind of against the local control narrative. So just beware, you'll probably see some more curriculum mandates, and we'll do our best to fight them off again. Last year, the social studies curriculum was the one that did make it into law. On the science side, the human growth and development, that one did not. So that's probably why it's back. And then I do see there's a question about the executive orders signed by President Trump and any impact on us in the immediate future. I cannot answer that right now. I don't think so, but I don't want to say with 100% certainty. A lot of stuff from the federal level, as you guys probably know, takes a long time to kind of trickle down. Hopefully that's our best guess, but whatever happens federally, luckily education is very state-based, so a lot of it has less of an impact. That's not to say there will be nothing. So I guess keep your eyes and ears open on that one. And then our last topic will be advocacy. What can you guys do about all of that, everything that we've just talked about now? So as you know, advocacy is all about relationship building. That's the #1 thing you can do. And this year there are a lot of new legislators. It's a new legislative session. So if you haven't already, introduce yourself. Let them know that you serve on a school board, you're a superintendent, you're staff at a school district, whatever your role is. And then attend any local forums. That's generally where a lot of questions get thrown out. They're more apt to answer questions. And then always stay engaged. As we've said, stuff moves pretty quickly this time of year. So, IASB, SAI, the AEAs, we're all trying to give you information as soon as we can, but always email us if you do ever have any questions. And then anytime, it's a little harder during session because they are here in Des Moines, but they do come back on the weekends. Fridays are a good time to invite them into your schools. A lot of legislators, they tell us things, crazy things that are happening in schools. And we're like, have you been to a school recently? So just invite them in, let them know what's going on. There are positive and good things happening in public schools. So we always want to emphasize that to legislators. Know that you're always a resource to them. A lot of your legislators do not serve on the education committee, so they know even less, and they don't come to every subcommittee and committee meeting. So you really can be a resource to them. And then, as always, just be prepared and know your specific ask when you talk to a legislator. A lot of times you get through talking about a lot of stuff and then you don't ask for anything, and they're usually prepared for an ask. So have something specific that you want to ask them for. That's usually what they're waiting for and what they want to ask a question about. And then specifically, you can explain the impact of proposed legislation. As we've said today, there isn't actually a lot out just yet. So it's almost a time to be proactive in your advocacy. But when specifically, SSA comes out or something about curriculum or anything, a student information system, what would that specifically mean to your district? Some legislators like anecdotes, some like numbers, some like both. So that's part of that relationship building. What does your legislator like to hear and what convinces them one way or the other? So again, share those stories from your district. Positive always is good because we want them to know public schools are succeeding. But like Dave said earlier, it has been hard the past few years. So share some of those struggles and maybe how those could be addressed without being super negative or down the entire time. And then if you are coming to our Day on the Hill, let your legislators know. Tell them you'll be there. Invite them to come see the student displays, all of that. And then just always, always, always offer to be a resource. Like I said, they are not education experts. A lot of them don't sit on the committee. So you know more than they do. So don't be afraid to share that and then offer it too. Hey, if you have any questions about anything, feel free to reach out to me. Here's my phone number, my email, just that kind of stuff to establish more of a relationship and be able to provide answers to your legislators, because I think a lot of them, they really don't know what's going on in our schools. So it's up to us to be that resource.
Just a couple things to add to that. I've been guilty of it myself, but when you come to talk to a legislator, don't have a notebook full of items you want to talk to them about, because it just won't work. Talk to them about one or two things that have some knowledge about, and share with them. We talk with them all the time, talk with people all the time about educating your legislator. As Michelle said, they don't necessarily know everything that you know. So educate them on what things are and aren't happening.
And then the last thing we'll say is another push for our Day on the Hill. It is next week. So on Monday evening, we have our advocacy and alignment, which is kind of a little bit of a deeper dive ahead of Tuesday, which we'll have our education session in the morning at the historical building. And then we'll head up to the Capitol. There'll be a ton of great student showcases there. Hopefully lots of legislators will stop through. You can ask to talk to your legislators. So we think it'll be a good day of public school pride, and we're having it a lot earlier this year. So I think it gives us a chance to be really proactive with our advocacy this year instead of kind of very reactive, which has been the case the past couple of years. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll give you a couple minutes.
Yeah, while they were doing that, there's just some comments about the per pupil equalization, and there isn't any conversation about that currently. Doesn't mean it couldn't come up, but there's nothing in the legislature about that now. Also about funding preschool, Michelle did a good job of explaining that, trying to get students from poverty fully funded. We're hopeful that we can make some progress on that. And I think we answered the rest of the comments that had questions in them. One thing I was going to have Kate mention, but I think she's just
She's
something
got to run to a
happened.
subcommittee, such as life at the
Okay,
Capitol.
well, so I do want to mention that the AEA task force did meet a couple of weeks ago, several weeks ago, and they are scheduled to meet again in February, and we'll see what happens there. They asked for a lot of information and data, so we'll see where it goes from there. A couple other things we haven't mentioned is mental health. There is a push. All of our organizations realize there's mental health issues with our kids, and getting them services and resources is a problem. We don't have a lot of solutions, and neither do legislators, but we're going to try to work with that. School Safety Committee is another one that met, and we had members from SAI and IASB on that committee to help provide some feedback to what was going on there. And they have some recommendations, which at this point appear to be doable and feasible for our school districts. So we'll see where that happens, where that goes. But it'll have to have legislative approval and legislative bills come out that will make that a requirement. So we'll see where that goes.
All right, well, I think that's all we have for you guys. If there are no further questions, we're going to sign off, but we're looking forward to seeing all of you who do come next week. And of course, you can always ask Dave or I any questions you have throughout the legislative session. I know stuff pops up quickly.
Yeah, and we appreciate, we had over 140, 150 on at some point here, and I know several people are dropping off now. There's a question, Michelle, in the Q&A, and I don't have the answer to that question right now, but we can find that.
Yes, absolutely. Can do.
And we'll put that out in either the SAI report or probably both IASB report. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, someone asked, how can we stay engaged with what is going on? So I know IASB and SAI, every week we put out kind of like a newsletter, what happened that week at the Capitol. At IASB, Emily Piper, she does a video each week if you'd rather watch it. The Iowa legislature's website is updated all day, every day. So if you happen to have time during the day and you want to see what they're up to right then, you can always go on the Iowa legislature's website. I know we also try to use social media as often as we can, but stuff does happen really quickly. So if you ever do have questions, seriously, just email us and we can always keep you up to date or let you know kind of what the day's schedule is, if there's any good subcommittees or anything like that.
Yeah, and we all do our weekly reports, and then if there's something that we needs immediate action, we both IASB and SAI, as well as other organizations, send out to some things. So there's a lot of ways that you can stay engaged. As an administrator, when I was an administrator, I would follow that legislative page, and you could even watch videos on there of meetings and debate on the floor. So those are good ways to keep with following what's going on, and it literally changes on a dime at times. So just stay tuned, and we'll see where it goes.
All right, awesome, everyone. Thank you. Have a good day.